I still remember that September morning like it was yesterday, though nearly 30 years have passed. The air had that particular crispness that signals summer's reluctant surrender to fall. My new dress, pale yellow with tiny white daisies, along the hem, had been carefully ironed the night before and hung on my closet door. Mama had braided my hair into 2 neat plaits, each one tied with a matching yellow ribbon. I remember staring at myself in the mirror that morning, 11 years old and bursting with a mixture of excitement and terror. "You look beautiful, Zora," Mama said, her hands resting on my shoulders as we both gazed at my reflection. "First day at your new school. How are you feeling?" I couldn't find the words to answer. We had moved to this neighborhood because Mama had finally saved enough for the down payment on a modest house in what she called a good school district. Our previous apartment had been in an area where the schools were overcrowded and underfunded. Mama worked 2 jobs to make this move possible: day shifts as a nurse's aide and evenings cleaning offices downtown. "Remember what I always tell you," she said, turning me around to face her. "You belong anywhere your feet take you. You hear me? Anywhere." I nodded, but my stomach was tied in knots. I had heard things about Westridge Elementary from kids at the community center. That it was different. That the teachers were strict but fair. That they had a real science lab and music classes with actual instruments. And that there weren't many kids who looked like me. "I made your favorite lunch," Mama said, handing me a brown paper bag. "Peanut butter and banana sandwich, apple slices, and I even put in one of those chocolate pudding cups you like." The walk to school was exactly 13 minutes. I counted each step, trying to calm my nerves by focusing on the rhythm of my new white sneakers against the sidewalk. As I approached the red brick building with its American flag fluttering in the breeze, I took a deep breath. Other children streamed past me, laughing and calling out to each other like old friends. Most of them were white, with a scattering of Asian faces among them. I didn't see another black child in the crowd. The front steps of Westridge Elementary looked steeper and more imposing than they had when Mama and I had come for registration the week before. I clutched my backpack straps tighter and began my ascent. That's when I first saw her. Mrs. Geller? Though I didn't know her name yet. She stood at the top of the steps, a clipboard in hand, greeting students by name as they entered. "Good morning, Jason. Did you have a nice summer?" "Hello there, Ashley. My, how you've grown." "Welcome back, Michael. Looking forward to 5th grade?" She was tall and thin, with short gray hair cut in what my grandmother would have called a sensible style. She wore a navy blue skirt suit that looked stiff and uncomfortable in the lingering summer heat. As I approached, I noticed her smile falter slightly, just for a moment, but I caught it. That slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible straightening of her posture. I stood before her, swallowing hard before finding my voice. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Zora Wilson. I'm new here. 5th grade." Mrs. Geller looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my carefully chosen outfit, my neatly braided hair with its cheerful yellow ribbons. She checked her clipboard, flipping through several pages with deliberate slowness. "I don't see your name here," she said finally, her voice clipped. "This is not your place." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, confused. "But my Mama registered me last week. We filled out all the papers and everything." "You must have gotten the place wrong," she continued, her tone suggesting she was speaking to someone very slow-witted. "Westridge Elementary is a neighborhood school. Perhaps you're looking for Lincoln Elementary. It's about 20 blocks east of here." Lincoln Elementary. I knew of it. It was in the neighborhood we had just moved from, the school with peeling paint and chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. The school where most of the students were black or Hispanic. No, ma'am, I insisted, my voice growing smaller. I'm supposed to be here. My mama and I just moved to Maple Street. We have a house there now. Something flickered across Mrs. Geller's face. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. She looked down at her clipboard again. What did you say your name was? Zora Wilson. Wilson, she murmured, running her finger down the list. Then she stopped. I could see my name there, upside down from where I stood. Ah, yes, here you are. Relief flooded through me. I took a step forward, ready to enter the building. But she didn't move aside. There seems to be some mistake, she said. I don't think you belong at this school. By now, other students had begun to notice our exchange. They slowed as they passed, curious eyes darting between me and Mrs. Geller. I felt my cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. My mama said, I don't care what your mama said. Mrs. Geller interrupted, her voice low but sharp. This school has certain standards, certain traditions. I'm sure you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. I stood there, frozen, as the school bell rang. Students hurried past us, eager not to be late on the first day. I remained rooted to the spot, unable to move forward, unwilling to turn back. I have my registration papers, I said finally, reaching into my backpack with trembling hands. I pulled out the folder Mama had prepared, containing all the documents we'd been given at registration. Class assignment, emergency contact information, school supply list, cafeteria menu for the month. Mrs. Geller barely glanced at them. Anyone can get papers. That doesn't mean you belong here. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. Mama had told me to always hold my head high, no matter what. The principal said we were welcome here. Mr. Davis. He shook my mama's hand. At the mention of the principal's name, something changed in Mrs. Geller's expression. A flicker of uncertainty, perhaps. She glanced around as if checking who might be watching this exchange. Mr. Davis isn't here this morning, she said. He had a meeting downtown, and I've been at this school for 27 years. I think I know who belongs here better than a principal who just started last year. I clutched my folder to my chest, unsure what to do next. Inside the building, I could see colorful bulletin boards welcoming students back to school. I could hear the cheerful chaos of children finding their classrooms, and here I stood, outside, being told I didn't belong. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding, Mrs. Geller continued, her voice softening slightly, though her eyes remained cold. Why don't you go home and have your mother call the district office to sort this out? I'm sure they can find a more appropriate placement for you. Just then I heard a familiar voice behind me. Zora, what are you doing standing out here? The bell rang 5 minutes ago. I turned to see Mrs. Chen, the school secretary who had helped us with registration the week before. She was carrying a stack of papers and looked mildly concerned. Mrs. Geller says I don't belong here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Chen's expression changed from concern to confusion. What? Of course you belong here. We registered you last week. Your mother brought in all the necessary documentation. Mrs. Geller straightened her shoulders. There appears to be some confusion about district boundaries. I was just suggesting that Zora here might be more comfortable at Lincoln Elementary. There's no confusion, Mrs. Chen said firmly. The Wilson family lives on Maple Street, which is well within our boundaries. I verified the address myself. She turned to me with a kind smile. Zora, you're in Ms. Jackson's class, room 23. Do you remember where that is from our tour? I nodded, relief washing over me. Good. Why don't you head there now? "I'll explain to Ms. Jackson why you're late." As I moved to pass Mrs. Geller, she stepped slightly to the side, just enough to let me through. But as I did, she leaned down and whispered, so softly that Mrs. Chen couldn't hear. "This doesn't change anything. You still don't belong here." I hurried into the building, my heart pounding. My earlier excitement completely evaporated. I found room 23 and hesitated outside the door, trying to compose myself. I could hear a woman's voice inside. Ms. Jackson, I presumed, taking attendance. I knocked softly and entered when a warm voice called, "Come in." Ms. Jackson was nothing like Mrs. Geller. She was younger, for one thing, maybe in her early 30s. She had warm brown skin, not much different from my own, and wore her hair in a stylish afro. Her smile seemed genuine as she greeted me. "You must be Zora Wilson," she said. "Welcome to Westridge Elementary. We've been waiting for you." Those 5 words, "We've been waiting for you," nearly undid me. After Mrs. Geller's cold rejection, they felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. I managed a small smile in return. "Class, this is our new student, Zora Wilson. Let's all make her feel welcome." There were 22 other students in the class. 20 of them were white, one boy appeared to be Asian, and one girl might have been Hispanic. I was the only black student in the room. Many of them stared at me with open curiosity. A few smiled. One boy in the back row made a face that I pretended not to see. "There's an empty desk right there, Zora," Ms. Jackson said, pointing to a spot in the second row. "Why don't you get settled and we'll continue with our first day activities?" I made my way to the desk, acutely aware of the eyes following me. As I sat down, the girl next to me leaned over. "I'm Melissa," she whispered. "I like your hair ribbons." "Thank you," I whispered back, a tiny spark of hope igniting in my chest. Maybe this would be okay after all. The morning passed in a blur of new school year activities. Going over classroom rules, distributing textbooks, a getting-to-know-you game where we had to find classmates who matched certain descriptions. When lunchtime came, Ms. Jackson lined us up to walk to the cafeteria. As we filed into the hallway, I saw Mrs. Geller approaching from the opposite direction, leading another class. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw that same cold disapproval from earlier. I quickly looked away, my stomach clenching with anxiety. In the cafeteria, I sat with Melissa and 2 other girls from our class, Emily and Sarah. They asked me questions about where I had lived before, what my old school was like, and if I had any siblings. They seemed friendly enough, though I noticed they exchanged glances when I mentioned my previous neighborhood. "My dad says that area is dangerous," Emily said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He says we're not allowed to go there. Ever." I didn't know how to respond to that. My old neighborhood hadn't seemed dangerous to me. There were families and children, small businesses and churches. Yes, some buildings were run down, and sometimes there were sirens at night, but it was home. It was where my friends lived, where I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every shortcut through alleys and vacant lots. "It's not that bad," I said finally. "People just live there, like people live here." The girls seemed unconvinced but moved, on to other topics. After lunch, we had recess on the playground, which was nicer than any I'd seen before. Modern equipment, a large grassy field, even a basketball court with actual nets on the hoops. I was standing near the swings, unsure where to go or what to do, when I heard a commotion nearby. A group of boys was gathering around something, laughing. I moved closer out of curiosity and saw they were surrounding the boy who had made a face at me in class. "Hey, chocolate girl!" he called when he spotted me. Want to play a game?" The other boys snickered, and I felt my face grow hot. I knew I should walk away, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. "I bet she can't even play basketball," another boy said. "They don't have real hoops where she comes from. I can play," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "I'm probably better than you." This was a lie. I had never played basketball in my life, but something about their smug faces made me want to challenge them. The first boy, whose name I would later learn was Tyler, smirked. "Prove it, then." I was saved from my own foolishness by the recess bell. As we lined up to return to class, I caught sight of Mrs. Geller watching me from near the school entrance. Her expression was unreadable from that distance, but her posture, arms crossed, head slightly tilted, suggested she was monitoring me specifically. The afternoon dragged on endlessly. By the time the final bell rang, I was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. I had never been so aware of my own skin, my own voice, my own presence in a space. It felt as though every word I spoke, every move I made, was being judged and found wanting. As the class filed out, Ms. Jackson called me to her desk. "How was your first day, Zora?" she asked, her voice gentle. I wanted to tell her everything, about Mrs. Geller at the front steps, about the whispers and stares, about Tyler and his friends at recess, but something held me back. In my 11 years, I had already learned that complaining sometimes made things worse. "It was okay," I said instead. "Thank you for making me feel welcome." Ms. Jackson studied me for a moment, as if sensing there was more I wasn't saying. "I'm glad you're in my class," she said finally. "I think you're going to do just fine here, and if you ever need to talk, my door is always open." I nodded, grateful for her kindness but still uncertain about everything else. "One more thing," she added as I turned to leave. "Mrs. Chen told me about what happened this morning with Mrs. Geller. I want you to know that I've spoken to Principal Davis about it, and he'll be addressing the situation." My stomach dropped. The last thing I wanted was to cause trouble on my very first day. "Please don't," I said quickly. "It's okay, really." "It's not okay, Zora," Ms. Jackson said firmly. "What happened was wrong, and Mr. Davis needs to know about it. You don't need to worry, though. This isn't your problem to solve." I left the classroom with mixed feelings. Part of me was relieved that someone was taking my side, but another part worried that involving the principal would only make Mrs. Geller dislike me more. As I walked toward the front entrance, I kept my eyes peeled for Mrs. Geller, hoping to avoid another confrontation. But there she was, standing near the doors, watching the students file out. When she saw me, she beckoned me over with a crooked finger. My feet felt like lead as I approached her. "Yes, ma'am?" "I understand you've been complaining about me," she said, her voice low but sharp. "No, Ms. Jackson tells me you were upset about our interaction this morning. I was simply trying to ensure you were in the right place. It's my job to maintain order in this school. I didn't complain," I said softly. I just answered her question. Mrs. Geller's lips thinned into a tight line. "Well, Principal Davis wants to see both of us in his office tomorrow morning. I hope you're satisfied." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You should know that making accusations against teachers is a serious matter. It could affect your standing here." Before I could respond, I heard someone calling my name. I turned to see Mama walking briskly toward the school, concern evident on her face. She must have gotten off work early to pick me up on my first day. "Zora, there you are. I was worried when you weren't outside waiting." She noticed Mrs. Geller beside me and extended her hand. "Hello, I'm Catherine Wilson, Zora's mother." Mrs. Geller hesitated before briefly shaking Mama's hand. Agnes Geller. I'm the 5th grade coordinator. Oh, wonderful, Mama said, smiling. How was Zora's first day? I hope she's making a good impression. Something flickered in Mrs. Geller's eyes. Caution, perhaps, or calculation. It's been eventful. Your daughter seems to be adjusting. That's good to hear, Mama said, though I could tell from her expression that she sensed something was off. Well, we should be going. It was nice to meet you, Mrs. Geller. As we walked away, Mama squeezed my hand. What was that about? Something feels wrong. I didn't want to worry her. Mama had worked so hard to get us into this neighborhood, to give me this opportunity. The last thing I wanted was to make her think she'd made a mistake. It's nothing, I said. Just first day stuff. But Mama knew me too well. She stopped walking and turned to face me. Zora Elaine Wilson, I've known you your entire life. I can tell when something's bothering you. Now, what happened? I took a deep breath and told her everything. About Mrs. Geller turning me away at the door. About her whispered warning. About the meeting with the principal tomorrow. As I spoke, I watched Mama's expression change from concern to anger, to a kind of steely determination I had seen before. I see, she said when I finished. Well, it seems I'll be attending that meeting tomorrow as well. Mama, no, I protested. You'll get in trouble at work if you miss more time. Some things are more important than work, she said firmly, and making sure my daughter is treated fairly is at the top of that list. That night, I could barely sleep. I kept replaying the day's events in my mind, wondering what I could have done differently, what tomorrow would bring. When morning finally came, I felt as though I hadn't rested at all. Mama called her workplace and arranged to go in late. She wore her good dress, the navy blue one with small white dots that she usually saved for church, and did her hair in a neat bun. She looked formidable, and I drew strength from her calm determination. Remember what I told you, she said as we walked to school. You belong anywhere your feet take you. Mrs. Geller doesn't get to decide otherwise. The meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock, half an hour before classes began. When we arrived at the school, Mrs. Chen greeted us at the front desk and led us to the principal's office. Mrs. Geller was already there, sitting stiffly in a chair facing Mr. Davis's desk. Principal Davis was a middle-aged black man with a kind face and a deep, resonant voice. He rose when we entered and shook Mama's hand warmly. Mrs. Wilson, I'm glad you could join us. And Zora, good morning. Please, have a seat. There were 3 chairs arranged in front of his desk. Mama and I took the 2 farthest from Mrs. Geller. I noticed that Ms. Jackson was also present, standing near the window with a serious expression on her face. I've asked us to gather this morning to address a concerning incident that occurred yesterday, Mr. Davis began. It has been reported to me that Mrs. Geller attempted to prevent Zora from entering the school, suggesting that she didn't belong here despite being properly registered and residing within our district boundaries. Mrs. Geller shifted in her seat. There was a misunderstanding, nothing more. I didn't have Zora's name on my list of new students, and I was concerned she might be at the wrong school. I was simply trying to be helpful. That's not what Mrs. Chen observed, Mr. Davis said calmly. And it's not consistent with what Zora reported to Ms. Jackson. With all due respect, Mrs. Geller said, her voice tight. Children often misinterpret adult interactions. I've been at this school for 27 years. My record speaks for itself. Mama leaned forward slightly. My daughter doesn't lie, Mrs. Geller, and she was very specific about what you said to her. Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Davis interjected gently, would you be comfortable with Zora telling us in her own words what happened yesterday morning? Mama looked at me questioningly, and I nodded. Taking a deep breath, I recounted the exchange as accurately as I could remember it. Mrs. Geller's initial dismissal, her suggestion that I belonged at Lincoln Elementary instead, her insistence that I didn't belong at Westridge, even after seeing my name on her list, and finally, her whispered words as I passed by her. She said, "This doesn't change anything. You still don't belong here." I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. Mrs. Geller's face had gone pale, but her expression remained defiant. "That is absolutely not what happened," she said finally. "I would never say such a thing to a student, Mrs. Chen," Mr. Davis said, turning to the secretary. "Can you please share what you observed?" Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "When I came upon Zora and Mrs. Geller yesterday morning, Zora was clearly distressed. Mrs. Geller was blocking her entry to the school and suggesting she would be more comfortable at Lincoln Elementary, despite acknowledging that Zora's name was on the class list. Her tone and body language were unwelcoming, to say the least. And can you think of any reason why Mrs. Geller might have singled out Zora in this way?" Mr. Davis asked, his voice carefully neutral. Mrs. Chen hesitated, glancing between Mrs. Geller and me. "I cannot speak to Mrs. Geller's motivations," she said diplomatically. "I can only report what I observed. I've spoken with several other staff members," Mr. Davis continued, "and it seems this is not an isolated incident. There have been patterns in how certain students are treated compared to others." Mrs. Geller's face flushed. "If you're implying what I think you're implying, I resent it deeply. I have always maintained the highest standards for all students, regardless of their background. And yet," Mr. Davis said, his voice still calm but with an undercurrent of steel, "we have documented instances where your treatment of students of color has differed markedly from your treatment of white students. Yesterday's incident with Zora is merely the most recent example." "This is outrageous," Mrs. Geller sputtered. "I've given my life to this school. I was here long before you arrived, Mr. Davis, and I've seen principals come and go. My methods have always produced results." "Results for whom?" Mama asked quietly. "For students who look like you, or for all students?" Mrs. Geller turned to her, eyes flashing. "I don't have to justify myself to you. You've been in this district for all of 1 week. You don't understand our traditions, our standards." "I understand enough," Mama replied, her voice steady. "I understand that my daughter has every right to be in this school, to receive the same education as every other child here, and I understand that you tried to deny her that right based on nothing more than the color of her skin. I never said anything about—" "You didn't have to," Mama interrupted. "Your actions spoke clearly enough." Mr. Davis raised a hand to gently redirect the conversation. "Mrs. Geller, I want to be clear about something. Westridge Elementary is committed to providing an excellent education to every child in our district, without exception. That commitment comes from the school board, from the superintendent, and from me personally." He leaned forward, his expression grave. "What happened yesterday was unacceptable. It violated our policies, our values, and potentially the law. I cannot and will not tolerate such behavior from any staff member, regardless of their tenure or position." Mrs. Geller's face had gone from flushed to ashen. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that effective immediately, You are being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation by the district. Ms. Jackson will assume your duties as 5th grade coordinator in the interim." "You can't do that," Mrs. Geller whispered, her voice suddenly frail. "My record will be taken into account, along with all other relevant information," Mr. Davis assured her. "But I must prioritize the well-being of our students. All our students." The meeting concluded shortly after that. Mrs. Geller left without looking at any of us, her shoulders rigid, her steps quick and uneven. Mr. Davis assured Mama and me that he would personally ensure I had a positive experience at Westridge going forward. As we prepared to leave, he asked if I would be comfortable going to class, or if I needed some time. I surprised myself by saying I was ready for class. "You raised a remarkable young woman, Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Davis said to Mama. "She shows courage beyond her years." Mama smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "She gets that from her grandmother. That woman never backed down from anything in her life." Miss Jackson walked me to class while Mama headed to work. On the way, she squeezed my shoulder gently. "I'm proud of you, Zora," she said. "What you did today wasn't easy, but it was important. Not just for you, but for other students who might have faced similar treatment." When we reached the classroom, the other students were already at their desks, working on a writing assignment. Ms. Jackson announced that she would be taking over some of Mrs. Geller's responsibilities, so another teacher would occasionally cover our class. Throughout the day, I waited for the whispers, the stares, the sense that everyone knew what had happened. But if any of the students were aware of the morning's events, they didn't show it. Melissa saved me a seat at lunch, Tyler avoided me at recess, and class proceeded normally. It wasn't until a week later that I learned the full impact of that meeting. Mrs. Geller had chosen to retire rather than face the district investigation. The official announcement cited personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. Ms. Jackson was permanently appointed as the new 5th grade coordinator, and a fresh-faced young teacher named Mr. Reynolds took over her class. My time at Westridge, elementary wasn't always easy. There were still moments of isolation, still times when I felt the weight of being different. But there were also friendships formed, lessons learned, achievements celebrated. By the time I graduated to middle school, I had found my place there. Not because anyone gave it to me, but because I claimed it for myself. Years passed. I graduated high school, went to college on a scholarship, and eventually became a pediatrician. I moved back to my hometown after completing my residency, determined to serve the community that had shaped me. One afternoon, about 15 years after that fateful first day at Westridge, I was working at the community clinic that served our old neighborhood, the one near Lincoln Elementary. I was reviewing a patient chart when the nurse poked her head in. "Dr. Wilson, your next patient is ready." Elderly woman, first-time visitor to the clinic, complaining of persistent cough and fatigue. I nodded, took the chart, and headed to the examination room. When I opened the door, the woman sitting on the table looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. She was much older, now perhaps in her late 70s, thin and frail-looking, with wispy white hair and deeply lined face. "Good afternoon," I said, smiling professionally. "I'm Dr. Wilson. What brings you in today?" The woman squinted at me, then her eyes widened in recognition. "Zora Wilson?" she asked, her voice thin but still carrying that same clipped tone I remembered. And suddenly, I knew exactly who she was. "Mrs. Geller," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes, it's me. Now, let's talk about your symptoms." She seemed flustered, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her paper gown. I didn't expect. This neighborhood has changed so much. Many things have changed. I agreed, taking out my stethoscope. Including me? Now, how long have you had this cough? As I examined her, I learned bits of her story through her halting responses to my questions. After retiring, she had lived comfortably for a while on her pension. But poor investments and a costly illness had depleted her savings. She now lived in a small apartment not far from the clinic, in the very neighborhood she had once implied was beneath Westridge students. Her medical issues were relatively straightforward. Bronchitis complicated by her age and living conditions. Her apartment, she admitted reluctantly, had mold problems that the landlord refused to address. "I've been to 3 other doctors," she said, a note of defiance in her voice. None of them seemed to take my concerns seriously. I thought about that 11-year-old girl standing on the steps of Westridge Elementary, being told she didn't belong. I thought about how it felt to be dismissed, to be seen as less worthy of care and attention. I could have simply written her prescriptions, given her basic instructions, and moved on to my next patient. Part of me wanted to, but the better part, the healer in me, knew what needed to be done. "Mrs. Geller," I said, sitting on the stool across from her, "I'm going to help you with this. We'll start with antibiotics for the infection and an inhaler to help with your breathing. But we also need to address the mold issue. I know a legal aid attorney who specializes in housing issues. With your permission, I'd like to refer you to her." Mrs. Geller stared at me, confusion evident in her rheumy eyes. "Why would you help? Me? After what happened?" I considered my answer carefully. "Because it's my job to help everyone who comes through that door. Because your health matters, regardless of our history. And because maybe, just maybe, this is how we break the cycle. By recognizing each other's humanity, even when it's difficult." She lowered her gaze, her thin shoulders slumping slightly. "I wasn't kind to you," she said softly. "I wasn't kind to a lot of children. I thought I was protecting something important, but I was wrong." I didn't respond immediately, letting her words hang in the air between us. Then I handed her the prescription I'd written. "Take this twice daily for 10 days. The nurse will show you how to use the inhaler. And here's the contact information for the housing attorney. Her name is Michelle Banks. Tell her I sent you." As Mrs. Geller prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "You became a doctor," she said, as if still trying to reconcile the fact. "A good one, it seems." "I did," I said simply. "Despite those who thought I didn't belong." She nodded slowly, her eyes meeting mine one last time. "I'm glad you proved us wrong." After she left, I took a moment to collect myself before seeing my next patient. I thought about calling Mama to tell her about this strange twist of fate, but decided to wait until I got home. Some stories are better told in person, over a cup of tea, with time to reflect on their meaning. Life has a way of bringing us full circle sometimes. The same hands that once tried to block my path are now the ones I'm helping to heal. It's not about forgiveness exactly. Some wounds run too deep for simple forgiveness. It's about choosing to be the person you needed when you were younger. About breaking chains instead of forging new ones. I often wonder how many other children face situations like mine. Moments when someone in authority looked at them and decided they didn't belong. And I wonder how many never found their way past that barrier. Never had someone like Miss Jackson or Mr. Davis or my mama to fight for them. If you've ever experienced something similar, that moment when someone tried to put limits on your potential, Based on who you are rather than what you can do, I hope you'll share your story. Not just the hurt, but how you overcame it. And if you know someone still fighting that battle, share this with them. Let them know they're not alone, that they belong wherever their feet and dreams take them. Because in the end, that's what matters most. Not the barriers others try to place in our way, but our determination to move past them, to claim our rightful place in the world, and perhaps when the opportunity arises, to help heal the very hands that once tried to push us away.